Finally.
Yeah, I'm Nathan Redder. I'm giving my presentation today on RuneScape E-Coin Comics. I don't have a disclaimer at the front because I don't think there needs to be a disclaimer. I am a expert on all things RuneScape, though. So you might be asking, what is RuneScape and what makes it the beautiful game? Because it definitely is the beautiful game. Right here we have a photo of some players in RuneScape of varying levels of equipment. So a little bit of history on RuneScape. RuneScape was first founded in 2001 by three brothers, the Gower brothers, and they made a company called Jagex that made RuneScape. That is a screenshot of the first version of their game. It's quite a bit different from what a lot of people remember RuneScape as, because this version of the game only lasted from 2001 to 2003. In 2003, they updated the game to RuneScape 2. RuneScape 2 is what a lot of people who maybe played in middle school or something like that remember the game as. It featured pretty significantly updated graphics, among other things, from RuneScape 1 and a lot of additional functionality. The game was then further updated in 2013 to RuneScape 3, bringing further developments. However, by this point, a lot of the original players who started playing in the mid-2000s grew frustrated with the direction the game was going in. They implemented a lot of changes that were kind of contrary to the original intent of the game, and they updated the game to be a lot more like World of Warcraft, depending on like word hotkeys and things like that. So in 2013, there was also a player referendum to bring what was called old school RuneScape back into existence. Old school RuneScape was basically a 2007 backup of the game that Jagex, the creators of RuneScape, had, and they implemented this game. They put this game into place in parallel with RuneScape 3. So there was a little bit more traditional of a RuneScape game in addition with the newer RuneScape game, and this version of the game was put in place in 2013, kind of bringing things back to what a lot of people remembered RuneScape as originally. And the picture there is the voting for implementation of old school RuneScape, and almost 500,000 people voted in favor of it. And all those people were active players in RuneScape 3 when they voted on it. So just a little bit of looking at the player base between old school RuneScape and EOC, which is the other name for RuneScape 3. You can see the blue line is the old school RuneScape player base, and the orange line is the RuneScape 3 player base. You can see that around 2015, 2016, old school RuneScape actually passed RuneScape 3 in total number of members, and now RuneScape 3 and old school has almost 4 times as many active players as RuneScape 3 does. For the rest of this presentation, anytime that I mention RuneScape, I will be talking about old school RuneScape, unless I am specifically talking about RuneScape 3 and specifically mentioned RuneScape 3, and that's because I play old school RuneScape still. So just a little bit.
Question.
What's up?
Does RuneScape Classic still exist, or is that gone? I genuinely don't know the answer.
Which was RuneScape 1, hasn't existed for maybe 5 or 6 years.
Damn.
So, like I said, any mention of RuneScape is going to be old school RuneScape unless otherwise noted. So some background: currency in RuneScape is called gold pieces, also known as GP. That yellow thing in the middle is a stack of gold coins. RuneScape has a heavy emphasis on grinding. That is just putting hours and hours into getting your skills up, and nearly all skills require significant time and resources to level up. Just as an indication of how much time it takes to level something up, the minimum level on a skill is 1, and the maximum level on a skill is 99, and the amount of experience it takes to double every 7 levels, your amount of XP doubles. So what this means in practice is that level 50 requires 100,000 XP, whereas level 99 takes approximately 13 million XP. Every 7 levels you go up, the amount of experience doubles. So that's every level is 10% higher than the level before, is the way that it works out. I have a fairly high level account. I certainly don't have one of the highest level accounts. I don't have a maxed account or anything like that, but I can make approximately 1 million gold per hour. That's pretty typical for higher level accounts. Just to put some context on how much things are worth in the game, it's about 1 million gold an hour. And nearly all of the highest level gear in the game cannot be made by players, and they're only obtained through monster drops. So if you kill a monster and it has a usually 1 in a few thousand chance of dropping a high level item. So that will get into the economics of the game a little bit later. So the first thing we're going to talk about is RuneScape skilling as well, just to give a little bit more context on some of the things we're talking about. One of the skills in the game is fletching. That's the skill of making bows and arrows. A pretty common way of leveling that up is to make yew short bows. Yew is a type of wood. So 1 yew log that you can chop from a tree can be made into 1 short bow. Every bow grants 67.5 XP, and it takes 1.8 seconds to make every individual bow. So as every 1.8 seconds, you can get 67.5 XP. Therefore, in order to reach level 99, which is 13 million experience, you need to make 193,000 bows. And 193,000 bows at 1.8 seconds each would take you approximately 100 hours. And the total amount of gold you would need to spend in order to buy all of the raw resources for that would be about 50 million gold. And again, high level accounts can generally make about 1 million gold an hour. So it's at least 50 hours just to generate the resources for it. And this is considered one of the fastest and cheapest skills to get up to level 99 in the game. So one of the fastest and cheapest skills you would need to invest approximately 150 hours into in order to get max level. There are 23 skills in the game, and some of the skills take significantly longer. So even the most veteran players in the game with effectively unlimited resources, if they make a new account, it's they calculate it out, and it would take them approximately 2,000 hours in order to get to max level in the game. And despite the amount of time that it would take to get max level in something like fletching, over 107,000 players have 99 fletching. So again, that just kind of shows how much the RuneScape player base puts, how much time and resources they put into this game. So one of the big economic effects on the economy is a spell called High Alchemy, which is the process of directly converting items into gold. It's a spell that you can learn through training magic in-game. And different items give differing amounts of gold that's set by the game developers themselves, with rarer items generally generating more gold when you cast the spell on them. So by having a High Alchemy spell in the game, it sets a price floor to many items. Many items, particularly final products, are often sold at their high alchemy value. So for example, we're talking about the bows that you can make in order to train in the game. These bows are created in such vast quantities by people leveling up, and they're not high level gear. There's a huge supply of these bows with no real demand. So these bows are very frequently converted into gold via high alchemy, and were it not for something like a high alchemy spell, these items would be practically worthless, and there would be millions and millions of these items with nowhere for them to go. Downside of this, though, is it constantly introduces gold into the RuneScape economy, just due to the fact that with all of these items, they're being constantly converted to gold, and therefore there's just a constant influx of gold in the game, which can cause inflation. In order to counteract inflation, the creators of the game introduced gold and item sinks. These are basically game mechanics designed to take both gold and items out of the game. The thought is that when you're constantly introducing gold, it makes it so that prices are constantly going up because there's so much gold present in the game just due to inflation. And with items also constantly being introduced into the game, it causes a constant devaluing of items. So in order to fight that, they have things like repair costs, as the highest level armor and weapons degrade, and that you can either you can fix these weapons up by either paying with gold or items. That's just one way to take both gold and items out of the game. And then there's also skills that are specifically put into the game with the express purpose of taking money out. The primary skill for that is construction. Construction is a skill where you can make your own house that has a number of benefits for you. And many of the resources that are required in order to level up construction, you can only purchase from in-game shops. So any of the gold that you funnel into the construction skill goes out of the game because it's going to in-game shops or it's run by NPCs, by computer players instead of by actual human players. In addition, construction is incredibly expensive. It takes approximately 150 million GP to reach level 99. So particularly very wealthy players with a lot of gold, they want to go for that skill to level it up, and they are in the process of doing that, taking pretty significant amounts of money out of the game. And then upgrades within your house itself, that is the upgrades that allow you to, go and have additional content in the game, also requires additional money, a pretty significant amount of money. For example, I don't have max level construction. My construction level is somewhere in the 80s. But in order to upgrade my house and take advantage of all the construction I have unlocked, it would take tens of millions of gold. And then the picture on the right is from something called the Duel Arena. The Duel Arena is a spot where players can fight each other and place bets on the fights. And all of the bets that they place in the Duel Arena are taxed. And you can see that where it says total stake with the different amounts of gold, that's the tax rate effectively that they're putting on the gold. So while the tax rate itself is pretty low, maxes out at 1% in the aggregate, with the amount of people who are spending money at the Duel Arena, is taking a pretty significant amount of money out of the game, again, in order to fight inflation. Runescape also has a buying and selling tool known as the Grand Exchange. It was introduced in 2007, and it allows the buying and selling of nearly any item. From the interface itself, Dragon Longsword is one of the items in the game. What you can basically do is you bring up a text box, or you can either type in an item you're buying, or you can select an item that you hold that you want to sell. You set the quantity that you want to either buy or sell, and then you set the price you want to buy or sell it at. The game then automatically pairs buyers and sellers and completes the transaction. This was a pretty streamlined way of buying and selling goods. Prior to this, you could only buy and sell goods in person with another player. So you would need to physically find another person who was broadcasting that they were either buying or selling an item, and then you would need to go and negotiate with them on a price to buy or sell it at. This takes a lot of that work out of it and has a pretty centralized method of buying and selling the items. In addition, the Grand Exchange has basically what's considered like a median price for an item, and that usually reflects market prices. For most items, particularly items that are sold in vast quantities, the vast majority of these items are bought and sold through the Grand Exchange, so the Grand Exchange effectively sets the price. Based on the Grand Exchange itself, there's a pretty wide marketplace of examinations of the Grand Exchange itself. If you're familiar with like Bloomberg terminals, there's effectively a Bloomberg subscription service for the Grand Exchange and for RuneScape. I don't subscribe to this, so I only have access to the free version online, but there are people who pay monthly subscriptions in order to get up-to-date price data from the Grand Exchange in order to make money in-game. So from the screen, these are the different market indices. It's kind of like the Dow Jones Industrial Average, where they have an index or a listing of different items, and they have some sort of average calculation of the value of these items, and they plot these values over time. So each of these indices reflect pretty significant portions of the RuneScape economy. And then the top left where it says market index, that's a index that's kind of an aggregate taking items from a bunch of the different indices in order to make one that's supposed to reflect prices of the RuneScape economy as a whole. So here we have the market index since it looks like approximately late 2016, early 2017. This is the whole market index for RuneScape. So we can see right now we're in a pretty significant price rise, although it looks like prices are starting to drop again. The reason for that is most commonly cited as the number of players who have come into the game due to the combination of most recently COVID, and then before that, the introduction of RuneScape Mobile. Last year, they implemented a mobile version of the game that you can play either Apple or Android, and that made a lot of new players come into the game, which made there be a pretty significant demand for a lot of raw resources because people are leveling up. So we can see that's usually attributed for the rise up until about January of 2020, and then the rise since then is attributed again to COVID. Just so many people aren't working or are working less or playing the game and are leveling their skills up. Here we have this is just another screen from the Grand Exchange Market Watch, which again is like the Bloomberg for RuneScape. Item we have here is an Abyssal Whip, which is a pretty high level. It's an item that's pretty commonly used by high level players for their standard main weapon. We can see that it has current prices, what you would get as a common offer price or sell price if you put it into the Grand Exchange, the margins between the sell price and the offer price. The reason for that is that there are players who are known as merchanters or flippers, where basically what they do is they buy an item low, sell it high. So that's basically telling them what they can expect their profit per item to be. And then on the right, we have the price of the item over time with all of the letter markings being different updates in the game. And that's, again, people try and leverage their knowledge of game updates into trying to predict how item prices are going to change again in order to make money off of these item price changes. Real world trading is a pretty significant issue in RuneScape as well. That's due to the fact that just due to how much time and resources it takes to level up, a lot of players buy gold through websites online because it's a shortcut in order to make it so that they can just buy resources without having to physically work for it in game. And generally the gold can be bought for 50 cents per million gold. Again, like I said, it takes about usually an hour to make 1 million gold in game. So just from a purely time benefit relationship, there are advantages to buying gold through real world traders. Particularly popular sources of this gold is East Asia and Venezuela. The pictures on the right, we see recent news articles talking about how Venezuelan players are making money in real life through RuneScape. From a variety of publications, including The Economist. And that's because in Venezuela, I was reading one of the articles, there was somebody talking about how they were only making $4 a month through, standard economic means. And then when they started playing RuneScape, they were making up to $400 per month. And that's really a testament to how in demand their resources for generating gold are. This is against game rules, and if it's determined that you are real world trading, many players are banned for it. Again, it's very interesting how a game that came out in 2001 is basically it's a livelihood for a number of people across the world. So botting is the process of using like a computer program or a macro in order to get things done in game. It's often used to generate gold for real world trading. So like people whose livelihood is to make gold, they're often running many accounts, all run by a bot in order to make the gold. Often the way that they do it is they generate purely low level raw resources for usually two reasons. One is that it's easier to write a bot that just chops down a tree rather than one that's doing something complicated in the game. And then also just due to the fact that many of these accounts are quickly banned. So it's easier to make a bot, quick pump as many resources out of it as you can for the day that before it gets banned. And then it gets banned, but you've already transferred everything over to a different account. Bots are also sometimes used by players to advance their own accounts without trading anything off account. The danger with that is that botting is against the game, and the creators of the game are generally pretty good at banning accounts, so you always run the risk of your account being banned if you do that. Picture on the right is a picture of many bots. That's the default character model, the green shirt, green pants, bald with a goatee. So if you just make a character, you don't change his appearance at all, that's what he looks like. It's kind of a stereotype that all bots look like that because it's a way to maximize the number of bots you make. You don't need to program a macro to change the appearance or spend the time changing the appearance. And they often have a gibberish name as well that's just a random combination of letters and numbers. It's generally seen that the presence of bots in the game benefits high-level players because it lowers prices pretty significantly. Because again, these bots are making low-level resources. Their main competition in terms of generating resources are other low-level characters. And high-level characters who are generally doing things that aren't easy to bot are relatively unaffected by the bots themselves for the things they're generating. The primary effect is it's much cheaper to level up skills due to the fact that many of the raw resources are pretty cheap. So Cluster Flutter is the name for the largest bot ban that RuneScape has ever seen. It was 25th of October 2011, and it's popularly known as the bot nuke. The picture on the right is a screenshot from the RuneScape homepage when they implemented the update. And this, with this bot, basically what they did was they determined the method through which botters were injecting code into the game in order to manipulate the game itself, and they were able to get nearly every bot. It also really exposed how many of the RuneScape players were bots because it reduced the player count by 40%. So at the time that this happened, approximately 40% of players were actively botting. Prior to this update being put in place, just an example of where botting was coming from and the significance of it. Prior to this happening in China, there were hundreds of thousands of accounts made every month, and after this, there were fewer than 1,000 accounts made per month. So it was really in East Asian countries in particular, there were companies effectively just making bots as quickly as they could, or making accounts as quickly as they could, purely to bot it, and this ban affected them pretty significantly, and it led to an increase in prices, which we'll show here. This is the one of those indices, both before and after, excuse me, both before and after the bot nuke. So the bot nuke itself happened in October of 2011, which would be in the middle of the screen. So prices went from the index of approximately 80 to 90 to peaking at about 150. So you see prices pretty much doubled for the common trade index over that period. And that's just due to the fact that 40% of the players were cut out of the game and all the resources that they made weren't being generated anymore. The last thing we're going to talk about is discontinued rare tradables. These are not present in old school RuneScape. These are only present in RuneScape 3, and that's due to the fact that they're heavily distorting on the economy. So discontinued rare tradables were basically items introduced in the early game that's pre-2002 for special holiday events. They were things like, you'd meet the Easter bunny and you would get an Easter egg, or Santa Claus would give you a Santa hat. Things that were supposed to be pretty mundane items, with just something, a little tip of the hat to the players for playing during the holidays. Well, the only time these items were ever introduced was during that one holiday time. So the Santa hat, for example, was only introduced during that 1 or 2 week period in the Christmas time of either 2001 or 2002, and there was never an introduction of the Santa hat again. So even though this item was purely cosmetic, it became incredibly sought after. Just due to the rarity of it and due to the fact that it was largely a status symbol. It showed that you either played the game when it was originally made or you were incredibly wealthy. The downside of this was that it created an ultra wealthy elite in the game. Having access to a large amount of gold made many training opportunities significantly faster because you could afford incredibly fast but costly training methods. Therefore, players who started off early and had these holiday items could effectively fund their training entirely through selling off holiday items and never needed to actually play the game to make money. They could just play the game to increase their amount of XP. We can see the index history for these rare items. The furthest back I could get was about 2009, but from 2009 it went from about 100 to 5,000, and there was from 2001 until 2009, there was about the same factor increase. So these items went from effectively worthless to being worth billions of gold. And that index we saw before likely underestimates the actual rare value because gold in the game is stored as a 32-bit integer. So the actual amount of gold that can ever be had on one account at once is maxed out at approximately 2.1 billion coins. So if we look at the index for these discontinued rare tradables, we see that it pretty much plateaued toward the end there. And that's largely due to the fact that a lot of the items started to hit the maximum amount they could possibly actually sell for in gold. You can see the Christmas cracker and the party hats are the most valuable items in RuneScape 3, and they're all worth the maximum amount of money. Therefore, players who are actually buying and selling these items never do it on the Grand Exchange. Instead, what they do is they buy and sell these items using combinations of gold and other rare items in order to have an effective value that's far above 2.1 billion coins. Again, these items aren't being introduced again, and they are not in old school RuneScape due to the fact that The creators of the game actually regretted putting these items into the game just due to the fact that they have caused really a have and have not situation in the game just due to the ultra wealthy. Any questions?
I guess I have an open-ended question that you can address in as much or as little detail as you want to.
Yeah.
But what would various economic thinkers have to say about the economy of RuneScape? Like, what would Marx have to say about RuneScape? What would Hayek, what would Piketty have to say about RuneScape? You don't have to pick them all, but I'm curious what various people, would they like the RuneScape economy? Would they dislike it?
It really depends on when in RuneScape's history you're talking about. So one of the big controversies of RuneScape past was that in 2007, credit card companies basically threatened the maker of the game with them. They basically told the maker of the game, we're not going to honor credit card requests to buy membership to your game anymore. And that's because a significant number of people who were botting were buying RuneScape subscriptions with stolen credit cards. And then people were, getting refunds for that. And it was happening at such a high rate that credit card companies threatened to blacklist the game. In response to that, the creators of RuneScape put in something called balanced trading, which is using those grand exchange values. A trade could only occur if the two items you were trading had the same value. So, for example, if you had an item worth 2 million gold, you could either buy or sell it for 2 million gold plus or minus a pretty small margin in order to actually sell it. And that was in order to make it so that real world trading couldn't possibly happen anymore, because you couldn't have these unfair trades of, buying gold from some third party. So in that regard, prior to that, RuneScape was pretty much an entirely unregulated economic system. So I imagine, the Hayeks of the world would probably be fine with that. Even though, RuneScape had a serfdom of its own, it was already well on the road to serfdom. I would argue that he probably didn't like the fact that, they implemented those types of changes. The Grand Exchange itself also got a lot of, there's a lot of controversy with that as well. Kind of from several schools of thought. One was from the RuneScape used to have a professional merchanting class. These were the people who bought resources from the creators of the resources, people who would actually gather them, and then they would mark them up and they would sell them to players. With the Grand Exchange, that was no longer necessary because that directly connected the gatherers with the consumers. So all of those people were highly critical of the Grand Exchange because their way of making money was entirely gone. There's also been allegations that the creators of the game manipulate prices through the Grand Exchange. It is known that they put both floors and ceilings on certain items. There's not really any proof that they're directly manipulating prices, though, but that's another controversy. I would imagine that someone like Marx wouldn't much like the discontinued rare items, though, because those were items with no real utility that served only as expressions of wealth.
I think
that's basically. Go ahead.
I said I think Friedman and Sewell would really like the way that this system worked just prior to the implementation of that fixed value system you described.
So they got rid of the fixed value system.
Oh, they did. So
in 2011, with that big bot ban, one of the things they did was they brought back free trade, and that was because in 2007 they didn't really have a way of knowing who was botting and who wasn't, or they didn't have a way that could successfully get all of them. By 2011, they figured that they had a pretty good idea who was botting and who wasn't, and that would allow them to go back to a fair or a system where you could have unbalanced trades.
So what's the barrier of entry to play the game? Is it like a fixed cost, or is it like per month? I've never played it.
You can play the game for free. It has a smaller world and fewer skills and things like that. And then other than that, you can play to have the full game. It's a somewhere, depending on how you do it and over the time you do it, it's between a $5 and $10 per month subscription. A lot of the botters, though, they only do free because you can, it lowers their costs, basically.
Can you go back to the graph where it kind of shows the general trend of it's the blue one over time? Yeah, keep going. That one?
Yeah.
So is there any like explanation for these like prompt jumps? Like I don't know, like a patch announcement or some kind of change in the policy?
I don't know specifically those like very sharp jumps. That was something I was wondering about as well. It could honestly be. I wouldn't be surprised if they change the indexes or the indices around every once in a while. It might be somehow tied to that. Although they said that they try and make it so that the change of the index itself doesn't cause these types of jumps. I don't know specifically what those are.
So, I was just going to chime in about stuff we were talking about previously and how kind of Marx's and Piketty's line of thought would not be quite applicable to RuneScape because there's no creation of wealth just through holding on to stuff other than rare items, which is what you were basically getting at, which is the one, and that's just because there's a limited supply more than anything else. Presumably, if all the wealthy players quit the game, I guess they would take their rare items with them. But if they didn't take their rare items with them, it conceivably would go down. But there's no making money just off of there's no being a landlord in RuneScape.
Yeah, there aren't real like investment opportunities, and there also aren't really like contracts. So both of those things kind of go against that. Things like the bot ban, though, did most likely exacerbate the discontinued rare tradables because it turned out that there were some pretty wealthy and high-level players that were botting all along, and they had hoarded a lot of these rare tradables. So the supply of these items cut down after the bot bans.
It's really interesting that you talk about like the 32-bit integer limit to gold, because I remember, so I played World of Warcraft, and that was like a big issue with, not with money, but with skill damage, where at some point, characters' health, as they continue to add more and more expansions, the number got too large to represent in the game. So they had to change their method of doing that because of the limitations of, int in C++ or whatever.
Yeah, so the creators of the game, like with level 99 skills, the actual maximum of XP you can have in a skill is 200 million. And there are, I think, 7 players that have 200 million XP in every skill. The creators of the game picked level 99 because they just picked what they thought was an arbitrarily large number that no one would ever get to that amount. And now there are hundreds of players who have reached that amount.
Also, when they made the game, it was old school RuneScape, or whatever you want to call it. Or not that. It was RuneScape Classic, or it was just called RuneScape at the time. But the skill training was much slower than I'll just
There were
say.
still people who got 99 in RuneScape Classic.
Yes, there were. But I believe Zazima got all of his 99s once it was RuneScape 2. I could be wrong about that.
But old school RuneScape kind of has a workaround for this gold thing, and that's that at any bank, you can exchange 1,000 gold for 1 platinum token. So they've effectively increased the amount of gold that you can hold on an account by a factor of 1,000.
So I guess getting back to like inflation that we've seen on some of the graphs, would it not be beneficial to trade in for the platinum tokens, betting on that basically the value of currency is going to change? You know what I'm saying? Like, is there a way where that exchange would work out in the player's favor?
So the thing is, not really, because if you exchange over platinum tokens, that's only a benefit if you have more gold than you can hold in a stack, which very few players do, because gold is going to hold its value against itself, if that makes sense. Because you can exchange 1,000 or 1 platinum token for 1,000 coins, but if you can just hold 1,000 coins, that's effectively the same thing. So what some players do is there's actually something called a bond, which is you can buy it either with in-game gold or with real-world money. It's through the creators of the game, and you can buy it for, I think it's like $5 or $10, and it gives you 14 days of membership if you redeem it, or It's an item that can exist in game that you can trade to somebody else and they can redeem it for 14 days of membership. So a lot of wealthy players hold on to bonds and they hoard bonds because bonds are worth like millions of coins each. And it's basically the thought on where RuneScape membership demand is going to change around. So that's what a lot of wealthier players hold their money in, is bonds instead of coins, because they think that bonds are always going to go up in value as opposed to coins, which with inflation might go down.
Is that also a mechanism for discouraging like the botting and creation of currency for online sale?
So I would say it sets a floor for the price you can buy gold at, but it's still pretty significantly above what you can buy on like a really shady website. Like on a shady website, you can buy 1 million coins for 50 cents. But I think if you use bonds, it's anywhere between $1 to $2 per gold or per million gold. So it's anywhere between 2 to 5 times more expensive. So if you want to buy gold in game and not break any rules, bonds are the way to go, but it is more expensive.
But if you want, so say that you're seeking rent or you're seeking subscription time, is it cheaper to purchase the subscription time or to purchase gold to purchase subscription time?
If you are in the United States making anywhere above minimum wage, I would argue that it is cheaper to just buy the membership. Because again, the membership is like $5 per month, and bonds are usually a few million coins. So,
but you could get a few million coins for less than that amount per month. Like
buy it through real world trading.
It just requires you to break the rules of the game, which if you you would not want to do for $5 for like a $1 a month benefit.
Yeah. So no, wow, that's what they used to control gold farming. Was they introduced that mechanic where you could purchase your subscription time with gold and also just pump the market full of gold.
Yeah.
J-Pow.
Yeah.
I have a question. Have there ever been any examples of currency or market manipulation?
Oh, there have been. So I don't have any graphs here, but there are things called merchanting clans, where basically what they do is they take an item that is very rarely bought and sold on the Grand Exchange. This clan buys a massive amount of these items. And the Grand Exchange does have buy and sell limits in order to counteract this. So for example, a lot of items you can only, in a 4-hour period, you can only buy like 1,000 of a certain item, just so that you're not unduly changing the average value. If you're buying significantly above or selling significantly below the median value already. So they buy a lot of one item. So let's say like, this isn't an item they've actually done it for, but just for sake of example, let's say coal. They buy a massive amount of coal, and these guys are known for making a lot of money through this. So then what they do is they make a clan chat in game, which is basically just like a chat you can join with other players in game. They tell them, hey, we are all buying coal right now, and we're going to sell it for 200 gold. And let's say the price right now is 100 gold. Well, these guys wait for the price to go up, and then they all dump at like 140 gold. All of the people they've tricked continue to buy it. The price continues to go up. Never hits the actual value, but those guys have already bought out of the system, and then it's just like a bunch of people they've tricked to hold millions of these items. So there's some people that made massive amounts of money doing that, where they would just manipulate all of the prices in the Grand Exchange. People would buy it up because they saw the price going up. It was basically just intentionally making bubbles.
Pump and dump, baby.
Yep. It was making bubbles intentionally just for the purpose of enriching yourself and making a bunch of usually new players poor.
I think one of the things a lot of economists of every ideological leaning would like about RuneScape is it very clearly demonstrates, and I'm not sure you guys learned this in your classes, but for chemical engineering, for me, they taught us basically net present value of money, where you'd rather have $100 today than $100 a year from now, because you can just invest it in the real world, a business or whatever. But in RuneScape, you can invest it in skilling up, and that in turn will allow you to make more money in the future. And so you are heavily incentivized to spend your money, and you are not incentivized to just sit on money for the most part.
Yeah, I would say most of the money that I make in game, I invest back into leveling up. Any other questions?
Leo, you missed it, but I asked Nathan what Marx would say about the RuneScape economy.
I was there for that. I got that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I said, this was originally supposed to be I wasn't originally planning on giving this. I originally made the first 2 slides, and then I was going to have my real presentation after that. But then I just decided to do this instead. So I imagine at some point in the future, I'll give my other presentation. But I decided to go this route instead. Oh, also, for anyone interested, I think on Friday, I'm going to be getting my first ever level 99 in Skill. So
Are you gonna live stream it?
I can.
Please do. Please do.
Yeah.
I should be getting level 98 today. And something that's interesting is the amount of XP to go from level 98 to level 99 is the same as going from level 1 to level 75. So exponential growth. Well, thank you very much. It was an honor.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what makes RuneScape beautiful.
What?
The beautiful game.
It's the beautiful game. And that's kind of just like, it goes without saying.
Yeah. I mean, those graphics themselves.
I don't know. I think it's very interesting how, I don't know. I think it's almost like an example of emergent phenomenon where you have like a set of pretty simple rules with just like different people all acting out of self-interest, and it gives rise to a lot of, complexity that you might not expect otherwise. Like there are people who invest a lot of time just into like market manipulation and tricking other players in order to earn electronic dollars, basically.
Yeah, I have my opinions on. I agree that RuneScape is the beautiful game, and I think it's because it has, like, every video game is basically just a dopamine machine for your brain or whatever, where like every time you complete something or you get a level, it gives you that little dopamine rush. And I think RuneScape has weaponized it more effectively than any other video game on Earth, and I respect that.
One of the big complaints and one of the things that made it so that old school RuneScape is so much more popular than RuneScape 3 now was that a lot of people who played the game claimed that RuneScape 3 had become easyscape because of the fact that, it only took some skills 50 hours to get level 99 instead of where it used to take 100 hours. So, their definition of easy is it's only taking 50 hours to get up one of 23 skills to level 99. So it is very much a case of, players also want to, players who already become max level want to justify the fact that they did it. So they want other players to spend hundreds or thousands of hours in order to get their account up as well. So another thing about this graph, though, is that even though old school RuneScape has like 3 times the number of active people, RuneScape 3 is still believed to make significantly more money for the creators of the game because the small player base they do have is heavily involved in microtransactions. So they're just like pumping those guys for as much money as they possibly can.